Welcome to the Does This Happen to You podcast, where we explore the funny side of truth is stranger than fiction stories. Our story this week is from Val Francis, who you'll find on Medium.com, and here is What Happens When You're Adopted by an Awesome Drag Queen. I'd Never Be the Same Again. It was my 21st birthday, and I was new to Brisbane. Knowing nobody, I celebrated my birthday with a single beer in what was back then the city's only gay bar. In those days, Brisbane had a reputation for intolerance when it came to queers, a situation not helped by what was undoubtedly the most corrupt police force in Australia at the time. Recalling all this, I know by rights I ought to have been nervous about my predicament if I'd had any sense. Of course, back then, I was 21 and fearless. In novels or movies, the actor playing me would likely have walked into a bar, encountered some good-looking stud, fallen in love, and lived happily ever after. Unfortunately, the real world doesn't work quite the same as in movies, and the similarity ended with me walking into the bar. It was the old Lennon's Hotel Bar, and back then I had it on reliable advice that it was the one place you could depend on if you were gay. So I was sitting on a bar stool nursing my beer when a man, not the stud in the movie, beckoned me over to his table. He was a fair bit older than me, with unfashionably long hair swept across the top of his head and an elaborate coif that looked dangerously effeminate for a redneck state. He had a beak nose and dark eyes, and was sitting with one leg hooked over the other, on which he rested the elbow of one arm, its hand holding his cigarette. "You look nervous, honey. You're new in town, I think?" I nodded, took out a cigarette, and lit it. "I flew in from Longreach this morning," I said. "Cowboy country, everyone's wet dream." He smiled and introduced himself. "I'm Tony DeVolk. My friends call me Tosca." Seeing the look I gave him, he added, "It's my drag name, honey." We chatted for over an hour, and he bought me a couple of drinks, refusing to let me pay for a round. Finally, he shocked me by offering me a bed at his place. Before I could tell him, thanks, but no thanks, he saw my hesitation and likely guessed why. "There are no strings attached, honey. Your lovely body will remain unmolested." Taking a cigarette from my packet, I offered him one, and lighting them gave me time to think. It was apparent to Blind Freddy that I needed to stay somewhere, and I wasn't flush with cash, having paid for my plane ticket. I looked at him and instinctively knew there was nothing devious or calculating about his offer. With Tony DeVolk, what you saw was what you got. "Do you mean it?" I asked. "Of course, honey, but call me Tosca. Always Tosca." 2 more beers, and an hour and a half later, Tosca unlocked his front door in Annie Street in the leafy Brisbane suburb of New Farm. Years after this episode of my life, I revisited the street, and it was as though time had stood still. Nothing had changed other than Tosca moving away from Brisbane. Entering his worker's cottage made me think I was entering the Mad Hatter's house. Its contents were an assortment of items acquired over the years, and there was a massive collection of tea sets, many of them Dutch Delft with its typical blue designs. Everything paled to insignificance compared with the wardrobe of drag outfits occupying the second room, which was relevant when I thought about where I would sleep, as I could only see one bed. "You'll enjoy my tea," Tosca assured me as he entered the tiny living room, wearing a Japanese kimono dressing gown. He carried a tray with a large teapot, 2 cups and saucers, a plate of biscuits, a sugar bowl, silver teaspoons, and a milk jug. It was a setting suitable for Buckingham Palace. "Shall I be mother?" he asked. Tosca owned a tea room where ladies would arrive from the country for a visit. The highlight of their trip would be a visit to one of Brisbane's tea rooms to have their fortunes told with the tea leaves. I recall many a gay party where Tosca would appear, slightly the worse for alcohol, dragged up as a gypsy woman, giving us our tea leaf fortunes. That evening, I met his neighbor, a German migrant known as Siegfried, his drag name. When I stayed with Tosca, I never discovered Siegfried's real name. What I did know was that he had to be the tallest drag queen I'd ever encountered. His height was accentuated by his insistence on wearing high heels when in drag, and having tall wigs he likely inherited from Marie Antoinette when she got the chop. Siegfried, in full drag, was outstanding. There was no other way to put it. Siegfried would be over every night, and together with Tosca, the pair would go through patterns and designs suitable for a Hollywood period drama. Me? I'd sit either listening to them, watching their antics, or praying they wouldn't get me into drag, as the two of them had promised when we were invited to a big party over on Kangaroo Point. Fortunately for me, we negotiated a compromise for the party. They would go in full drag. Back then, those ladies put the piss into piss elegant. For those that aren't familiar with the term, it means they were resplendent with faux jewels, hands sewn to their dresses with matching handbags, wigs set like cement with 2 cans of hairspray, any visible body parts waxed, and the closest face shaves known to mankind. What they dressed me in was more of an afterthought. The party's theme was Bonnie and Clyde, so they found me a moth-eaten black skirt and a white top that they burnt holes in with their cigarettes to simulate bullet holes from the pair's last shootout. I hate to think where they found the wig, as it smelt strongly of cat. Mind you, it could well have come from Bonnie Parker's grandmother. Was she a cat lover? It was certainly old enough. To finish their creation on my behalf, they discovered a beret that might once have been fashionable, but wasn't anymore. I was surprised our taxi driver didn't bat an eyelid when the cab approached the curb and his passengers exited Tosca's cottage. He was a brave man accepting the fare. It was an easy drive from Tosca's, with them taking the opportunity to wave to the passengers in adjacent cars, much like a royal tour was in town. We arrived at our destination safely, though there was almost a disaster when Siegfried nearly decapitated her wig while alighting the taxi. Inside the venue, there was scarcely room to move. Thankfully, when compared with Tosca and Siegfried, the drag present was what you'd call restrained and in keeping with the Bonnie and Clyde theme. I never lost sight of them once during the party. I just watched for the hair moving above the mass of sweaty bodies. Going home was decidedly quieter than the trip there. Gone was the elegance as they leaned against each other, both with a glass of something unrecognizable, which they definitely didn't need. They were so intoxicated that neither of them could manage to put more than 2 words together. The following week, I moved out and went to share a large house 4 doors along from Tosca's cottage with 3 other gay guys I'd met. Inevitably, given the proximity, Tosca notably continued to influence my life in Brisbane. The pair was out loud and proud in a corrupt state where the cops loved nothing better than picking up gays and the drag queens, and beating the shit out of them. I think it's because of Tosca and Siegfried I came to respect drag artists. On the other hand, my one-time appearance was utterly forgettable, but the image of those two regal ladies will stick in my mind until I die. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris Kepler, and I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories as much as I enjoyed narrating them. I'd love for more people to hear these wonderful stories, so please share and tell your friends.